Hello,
Hello.
how are ya?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. There was a little mix up on the time, but other than that, I'm good.
Yes, I'm glad we got it all figured out. I'm excited to hear.
Me too. Where are you located?
I am in Virginia.
Is that why it says Virginia?
No, my name is also Virginia.
Oh, lovely. Nice to meet you,
Uh,
Virginia.
Nice to meet you. And where are you from? Coming from now?
I now live in Las Vegas, of all places.
Oh, okay. One of my best friends from high school just moved there, so I'm thinking I might have to go visit her.
Oh, it's a good place to visit. I actually
Oh,
love with it. Hi.
good.
Hi, Joyce. Hi, Lisa.
Hello there.
How's everyone doing?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah,
Doing real good. I'm doing real good. Thank you.
good.
I'm good. Good. Glad to see you. Hi, Virginia. Getting your
Hi.
walk in. Get mine in, will ya?
Yeah, I'm going to my car so I can drive home. I just found
Oh,
3
okay.
cents.
You're rich.
Were you guys on the call this morning?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's all
We-
good.
We had different time zones going on.
Mhm.
That happens.
Yeah, so we chatted briefly this morning.
Did you? You had your own little wow.
Girls
Yeah,
can
three of
talk.
us.
You managed.
Oh, yes. We try.
I bet you do just fine.
Thank you.
I hear a baby.
That's my granddaughter.
Aw.
She was born in July, so a year ago. So yeah, I'm babysitting, so I gotta go get her.
Sweet. So
I'm looking at your background and how nice and clean, and then I look at my mess behind me. Oh,
I have messes like that in different areas. Gotta have it all, right? This is my little yoga meditation space where I teach and do my clients, and so I like to keep it a little zen.
yeah.
How long have you been working with Jenny?
Couple years. Couple
Nice.
years. Yeah.
She's
Long enough to get it right, but
good.
I'm not getting it right. I was saying it's long enough that I should be getting it right.
It's a journey, right?
For sure.
It's always going to be kind of the little ups and downs. So do you think this is it? Should we get started, or do people...
Oh yeah, I'd go ahead and start. If anyone joins in, they'll just pop in.
All right, cool. So I'm really excited to be here with you three. I was excited that Jenny invited me a couple months back, and she kind of turned me onto the book writing process. It was something that I always dreamt I would do. I didn't know how or why I would do it. And it was my mom's dream and passion to be a published author. And she was a writer, and she got published in magazines and newspapers and wrote articles and whatnot, but she never got a book out, and she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a year ago. So when I got the message that she got diagnosed officially, I'm like, okay, I got to write this book right now for both of us. And I knew that I wanted to write about my time in New York City, which is when I was diagnosed with PTSD, but I was never sure how I was going to end it. And then I'll kind of talk about this as we go along, but 2 years ago, I got a phone call from a friend of mine that I know from the academy we study at in India, and she lives in Las Vegas. And I always looked at her like, how in the hell do you live in Las Vegas? I just can't even imagine. Oh, look at the little bee-boo. That's good energy to have with us. I got a phone call from her, and she said, look, I just got a call from the Clark County coroner of Las Vegas, and the 1 October shooting had just happened, and 58 people were killed, and they were looking for trauma meditators to come in and guide meditation for the first responders. And my dear friend that lives here was going to India the next day, and she's like, Catherine, I really need somebody to come in. Can you do this? And I'm like, whoop, there's my bookend chapter. So I knew I had 9/11 to start with. And then 18 years later, after doing all the self-transformational work on myself, here I was now guiding meditation for the first responders that were responding to that traumatic incident. So pretty cool. I mean, cool, I guess. I don't know. It's like shitty stories, to be honest with you, but it seems like it's happening more and more in our world these days, where traumatic incidents are occurring on a more regular basis, and not only in public places, but all of us, I think, experience trauma. I mean, it's said that over 80% of us are going to be diagnosed with some traumatic incident at some point in our life. And every person I've ever met, they've had some kind of traumatic experience. It's hard to define what trauma is because there's such a wide spectrum. And what, you know, when you would hear PTSD 10 years ago, people would automatically think you're a war veteran or a rape victim. And that was kind of it. The more research that's being done, and there's a lot of research being done on PTSD and trauma now because there's so much of it happening, they're seeing that many more of us have symptoms of PTSD, which obviously stems from trauma, but it's on the greater spectrum. I'll get into this more as we go along, but so many more people, I think, are getting diagnosed with PTSD than ever before. I put a little caption at the beginning of my book about PTSD, calling it a disorder, because I don't believe it really is a disorder. I believe, for me, and I'm just going to speak for myself, it was a wake-up call. And it really led me into myself. It really led me into my journey. And it actually empowered me. And instead of PTSD disorder, I like to say PTSG, post-traumatic stress growth, because we can grow so much from our traumas, from our hurts and pains. And I don't like to label people with disorder because it makes you feel like you question whether or not you can really heal from it, you know? And I'm here to tell you that you can heal from it. Was it an easy journey? Hell no. And did it require me to dig really deep and put one foot in front of the other day after day after day and show up day after day after day? Yeah. It takes, honestly, somebody that really wants to heal to be able to heal without prescription meds, without abusing alcohol, without abusing drugs. They prescribed me with Klonopin. I'll tell you my story first. I grew up in Wisconsin, and nice Midwestern family upbringing, all peachy keen. And when I was 21, I'm like, I'm either going to go to college or I'm going to go move to New York City and pursue my career, which was a hairdresser at the time. And it was coming from a place of boredom. That's why I wanted to move or go back to college, because I was bored. And I got a really great job at Frederick Fekkai. I don't know if any of you know Frederick Fekkai, but it's like a celebrity hair salon in New York City. And moved out there, worked as an assistant, making minimum wage, working my butt off, trying to make ends meet, and really built up a life there that fulfilled what everybody told me was the American dream. So I had everything that you would want on the external. I traveled the world. I had amazing friends. I met famous people. I was engaged to be married to a Wall Street guy. Everything looked like perfection on the outside. And then 9/11 hit. And I was also running my own business at that time. Me and another woman opened up a salon, super successful. We couldn't keep up, to be honest with you. And then 9/11 hit. I get a phone call from my business partner the morning of, and I just got home from taking a run in Central Park. It was a beautiful sunny day in Manhattan, and I had just moved to the Upper East Side from living downtown. I always lived downtown. And somehow the divine or supreme intelligence plucked me from downtown and put me on the Upper East Side for 6 months. And that's right when 9/11 happened. She called me up hysterically crying, and I'm like, my business partner is not emotional. She doesn't cry. There's something's up. She goes, I just watched a plane fly into the World Trade Center. And I'm like, no, that couldn't have happened. I'm watching the Today Show and it's not on the Today Show. That was my mentality. That's how kind of disconnected I was. And she's hysterically crying and she's like, no, I can see the plane hanging out of the building. And I'm watching the TV and all of a sudden, boom, it flashes on and you see the plane hanging out of the building. And my fiance at the time worked a block away from the World Trade on the 25th floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go. Hung up the phone, called my fiance, and I'm like, did you see what happened? Can you see it? And he said, I can't even see out the window. It looks like a ticker tape parade. There's paper everywhere. You can't see anything. And I said, will you please leave right now? And he's like, no, honey, I think it's okay. It was just an accident. Please leave, please leave. No, it's okay. I think it'll be fine. Boom, the second plane hits. I literally like turned into Kali and started screaming, get the F out of that building. And he grabbed his briefcase and he was the last subway to get out of downtown before the buildings crumbled. He lost 25 close friends from Columbia Business School that all worked in the World Trade. I lost my college roommate that we spent a semester in Italy together. And I hadn't seen her in 2 years. And a week before 9/11, she showed up at my place of work, totally unexpected. I hadn't heard from her in 2 years, and she opened the door, and I'm like, oh my God, Brooke, what are you doing here? And she was like the sweetest, kindest little angel. And we were so excited to see each other and kind of reconnect. And that whole week, we kept playing phone tag, trying to make plans to go out for dinner. And she was on the 102nd floor. And you know, when stuff like that happens, back then, I knew it was eerie, but I didn't know what it meant. And now today, after all the work I've done, it was her saying goodbye. I mean, it was, what a gift. Like I got to see her before she passed, a week before she passed. So, I mean, that day, I tried to sleep because I was just trying to escape, to get away from the enormous amount of fear. My body was in fight, flight, freeze. I made it through the next couple weeks, not very well, but ended up in a psychiatrist's office, which I went to therapy, but I'd never been to a psychiatrist. But I'm like, something's really effed up here. I'm having nightmares. I'm having panic attacks, and I'm not generally a anxious person. I'm known for being pretty calm. I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. And before I could even finish telling the doctor what was wrong, he said, you have PTSD. Here's a prescription for Klonopin. Take this 3 times a day. You'll be good. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, all right, the doctor told me this is what I need, so I guess this is what I need. That was my mentality. And I started taking it. I was never really into prescription meds, but I was desperate. And within a few months, I'm like, wow, it really did take that edge of anxiety off, but it also took the edge of joy, fulfillment, sexual drive, creativity. It took the edge off of all emotion. So, you know, we think we can numb out the bad feelings, the negative feelings that feel good, but what you end up doing is you end up numbing out all your emotions. You can't just pick and choose which ones you want to numb, right? So after about 6 months of being on Klonopin, I'm like, I can't do this. I feel dead. I feel like a zombie. This is not going to work for me. I'm going to have to figure out another way. So I went off the Klonopin, sold my part of my business, and left New York City. Everyone thought I was insane because I had this dream life that everybody, you know, kind of looked at with amazement, and I walked away. I'm like, I can't do it. And thankfully, I have no regrets. But if I had the knowledge and the wisdom, the experience that I have today, I'd love to be in New York City. I mean, what a fun life that could be. Would I ever move back there? No. But my point being is, by me picking up and moving location, so I went to Montana from Manhattan, I needed that drastic of a change to kind of recalibrate. And what took me to Montana was a whitewater rafting trip down the middle fork of the Salmon River. I don't know if any of you are river people, but it's probably the most pristine river in our country. And I grew up camping and in nature a lot, but when I got to New York City, that kind of fell to the wayside and I got very materialistic and city driven. So when my brother and his wife lost a baby at 5.5 months, right around 9/11, they called me up and said, why don't you come on this whitewater rafting trip as a healing trip and we'll heal together. And I'm like, all right, that sounds good. I'll do that. Well, life-changing. Whitewater rafting down class 4 or 5 rapids is intense. It's scary. It's challenging. It's amazing. It's gorgeous. It's everything. But by the end of the day, I'd sit on the side of the river and I would just close my eyes and I could feel for the first time in such a long time a presence. I could feel some kind of energy from the water and from nature. And, you know, I grew up Catholic until I was 12 years old, till my parents got divorced, and then we stopped going to church. And so God for me was always a white man in the sky with a long beard and a pointy hat, kind of making me feel guilty and smacking my hand. And so it wasn't warm and fuzzy for me, God and religion. It was always something that I cried out to when I was in complete desperation and desperation only. So, you know, if something would happen, if something went wrong and I'd end up in tears, I'd get on my knees and be like, please, Lord, please, I promise I'll never do it again. And then it would get better. And 2 weeks later, I would do the same thing again, right? I'm sure some of you have done that before. And I'm an identical twin. And she moved to California, I moved to New York, and that kind of sums up our personality differences. And she was always way more woo-woo guru than I was. I was much more type A personality, business driven, money driven. And she was, into alternative, shamanism and Native American medicine. And I always kind of looked at her like, it's not real, or it's not really working. Or I'd call her up stressed out and be like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And she'd be like, the universe will take care of it. And I'm like, shut up. No, it won't. The universe won't take care of anything. So that was my mentality. So when I went down the middle fork of the Salmon River and day after day would sit at the riverbank and just sob and sob and sob, feeling this immense, immense energy from nature. And I'm like, that must be God. Like, that must be what makes thousands of fish swirl around in beautiful formations in the bottom of the ocean without hitting each other. There's something that makes that happen. And that's what I was feeling. That's what I was experiencing. And went back to New York, cleaned up business, sold my part of the business, called off my wedding, moved to Montana to go back to school to become an acupuncturist. And it was then that my twin sister was diagnosed with a tumor in her eye, and they didn't know what it was. It was very rare, and they were afraid it was cancer. And we were 36 at the time, and she was a single mom, and she asked me to come out and help out, and I'm like, of course I'll be there. And the night before I flew out to be with her, she went to this healing circle that a friend of hers invited her to that she had never heard of. It was called Diksha. And when she picked me up at the airport, when I walked outside to get in her car, I looked at her and I'm like, something looks different. Like, something shifted. And she just looked at me and she goes, I went to this thing called Diksha last night and they put their hands on my head. And I'm like, I don't know what they did, but I feel really, really good. And I'm like, more of her woo-woo guru stuff. Okay. But then her surgery was a success. Everything was fine. And I slowly started to observe her change. And it wasn't anything she was changing externally. It was coming more from inside. And within 3 months, after a series of miracles, she ended up in India at this academy to study for 21 days in a silent retreat. And I was very skeptical. I'm like, you're getting involved in a cult. I don't know what it is. And she came back, and this time I picked her up at the airport. And when she walked out of baggage claim, I'm like, whoa, what did you do? Like, something is seriously changing inside of you. And she's like, I can't explain what it is, but it's amazing. And I feel more peace inside than I've ever felt. I feel more connection. So 5 months later, I found myself in India at the academy that I've been studying at for the last 16 years. I lived there for 3 years, thought I was going to become a monk. Another one of my escape mechanisms that didn't work out. But an amazing 3 years of growth and experience that I will never, ever forget. It helped me grow more than anything else has in my entire life. And it's through the studying that I've done at the academy, which is all about looking inside oneself and doing different meditations and different practices, physical practices, to help recalibrate the nervous system, to help create new neural pathways in the brain that take you from being in a stressful, anxious place back into a state of calm and connection. And it's through years and years of practice and showing up and doing the work that I completely healed from PTSD, from any trauma I've had in my life. And I was date raped when I was 16. So I had that trauma. I mean, it's amazing. And the clients that I work with, I only work with people that are really ready to do the work, because all I do is basically prescribe what I know is going to work for you in that moment to get you to keep elevating your consciousness. That's what we got to keep doing, is elevating our consciousness. If we keep trying to solve the problem that we have from the same state of consciousness, it doesn't work. So you need to elevate, and then you have a new clear perspective, and then you're able to see maybe a deeper meaning as to why the trauma's affected you the way it has, or what you can do to come through it. So that's my story. Do you guys have anything? That was a lot of talking, but I wanted to get my story out so you guys kind of knew who I was. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about trauma and how it affects you, but I'd love to open it up for any comments or questions or. No,
I don't really.
Nothing now.
Questions, yeah. Just wow.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. So when I went to write the book, I'm like, how am I gonna do this? And again, my passion was to help people get through trauma without having to abuse drugs, alcohol, and prescription meds. We live in a culture now that's so pill happy. It's like a pill for anything. I look at our youth and I'm like, oh, stop. You know, kids are coming in different. Kids are being born with a different DNA than we were born. Trying to squeeze them into the same old paradigm, like the same box that we were in, and it doesn't work. And it doesn't work, so then they give them a pill to try to make it work. And it's like, no, we need to change the system. So, like I said earlier, trauma and PTSD, it's on a wide spectrum, so it can be really hard to define. It can stem from one single experience or from repeated events that can overwhelm a person's ability to integrate the emotional aspect and also the ideas behind whatever happened. So part of what caused me to have PTSD was reliving over and over these jet planes flying into the sides of buildings that then crumbled down to the ground and killed 3,000 people. That idea and concept was too much for my mind to assimilate and process. And when that happens, your brain goes into fight, flight, freeze, which I'm sure you guys have heard about. It's when the limbic system part of the brain gets activated. It's like our alarm system. The amygdala is the alarm, which is part of the limbic system. And great that we have it, because it's what tells us there's a snake in the room, you better turn around and run the other way. But when you suffer from either a single event that is extremely traumatizing or repeated events, that alarm system doesn't stop going off. And when that alarm system doesn't stop going off, it starts to wreak havoc on our body, on our psychological state, our psychological welfare, and slowly but surely your life will start to kind of fall apart. So I'm all about the mind, body, spirit connection. That's my whole jam. One feeds the other. A lot of times I'll just say mind, body, breath, because I believe breath is spirit. And so whatever is happening in the mind is affecting our body. Whatever's happening in our body is affecting our mind. And the power of the breath is like way more powerful than people want to believe. The breath can heal you from so many things, but we live in a culture that barely breathes. Like our diaphragms are so weak that it's no wonder we have an anxiety-ridden culture. You know, there's more anxiety and depression in our culture than there ever has been before. And according to the World Health Organization, it's only going to go up. They say that by 2030, depression and anxiety are going to become an epidemic, which is frightening. I mean, and so what are we doing to try to navigate through that in a more alternative, healthy, holistic manner? That's my jam. So trauma can come, I always say there's some common denominators with trauma. It's unexpected, so it's a shock to your body and your mind and your spirit. The person that's traumatized was unprepared, and there's nothing that the person could do to stop it from happening. So I like to break trauma down into 3 different components. There's acute trauma, which comes from a single incident. There's chronic trauma, which is repeated. So if you think of domestic violence or sexual abuse over and over and over, that's chronic trauma. And then there's complex trauma, which is when somebody's exposed to various types of traumatic events, which is horrible. So am I a doctor that's healing PTSD and trauma? No. But what I do is guide people into utilizing, you have everything inside of you to heal. That's the reality. Sometimes we need medication to get that amygdala, that alarm system, to quiet down enough so that we can start recalibrating and rebalancing our body, mind, spirit. So that's cool. Like, I'm not against prescription meds by any means. We definitely need them sometimes. We need it to calm down the nervous system enough so we can do the work. But then we can do the work, you know? And most of us are too lazy to do the work. We don't want to do the work. And I'm just looking at my notes. So do any of you want to share about a trauma or PTSD that you think you might have or that you've experienced?
Oh, sorry. Mine is more related to, sorry, got home and walking upstairs. is more related to health issues. I was born with a congenital heart problem. I had surgery when I was 5, and then right after high school, I had open heart surgery.
Wow.
And now I'm just having lots of other issues, mainly with digestion and arthritis in my hands. So it's just the repeated.
So after you had the surgery, was it considered healed?
No, I still have to go to the cardiologist every year. I still have a leak in my aortic valve, and I might need a valve replacement eventually.
Wow, that's intense. Is there anything that they prescribe for you to do outside of taking medication?
No, I don't take any medication for my heart. I'm just not allowed to lift really heavy weights. I just, pain-wise, I started getting massages after that because of my shoulders with how I was during the operation. But yeah, nothing, no other kind of support. It was at a children's hospital, so I don't know if that makes any difference because I was 17 at the time, but it started from when I was born. We went to the same hospital.
So what I've learned through the years is that our physical body is either in a thriving state or in a survival state. And when our body is in survival state, it's constantly trying to fix itself, it can be exhausting. It can burn out your adrenals. It can burn out your thyroid.
I just recently had half of my thyroid removed because I had a goiter that was growing into my throat. Yeah.
And the school of thought that I come from is our state of mind, because our mind and our body are so connected, our state of mind is critical in helping our physical body thrive. And so what does that mean, or what does that look like? If we tend to be in a stressful state more than we are in a beautiful, calm state, that state of mind is going to directly get reflected into our physical body. All of us live pretty stressful lives, I would venture to say, especially if you have kids, if you have a job. I mean, I think for women, it's extremely difficult these days to not have stress. My mom was one of the feminists in the 1970s that swung her bra around and got us, the right to vote. And yet there's part of me that's like, Mom, not only now do we have to do the household chores, take care of the kids, but now we have to go to work full time and wear a pantsuit and bring in money. I'm like, we just screwed ourselves. So that's a whole nother topic. But so do you have a daily practice?
I was doing meditation for a while. I've, for some reason, gotten away from that in the last couple months. But I try to do, affirmations daily and gratitude. But yeah, I need to get better at that again.
So that's one thing that definitely helps. It's medicine for me. I say meditation is my medicine because it puts your mind into a calm, connected state. And even if we do that first thing in the morning and it only lasts for 5 minutes, it's better than none at all. So that's one thing I would recommend. And I teach a course called The Beautiful State. It's a course, and it's all about admitting and being authentic and saying I'm in a stressful state, because a lot of us also try to cover up when we're in a stressful state, right? We have to put on the smiley face and say, no, I'm good, I'm fine. When in actuality, we're feeling a lot of anxiety and stress. So the first step would be to stop and say, I'm feeling stress, or I'm feeling fear, or I'm feeling sad, or whatever the emotion might be. So to first stop and then kind of take an inventory on what's happening inside my body. Our bodies don't lie. Our mind and our bodies are connected. Once we stop, we can usually feel in our physical body where we're holding the stress, probably our throat, sick to our stomach, our chest feels tight, I have a neck ache, my lower back hurts, my knee hurts. Wherever you got that pain or that contraction, that's where we're holding the stress. And for some of us, it's many places. So to take an inventory and then become aware of your breath. What am I doing with my breath right now? And then you move into connection, being connected. I'm telling the whole whitewater rafting story, the reason I shared that with you is because it was such a profound moment in my life of finding connection again and the importance of connection, because we live in a world that is so I, me, self-centric thinking that is very contracted and it's very limiting, and it continually reinforces that sense of separation between me and you instead of expanding out to the interconnection of we and us, remembering that we are one giant interconnection of everything. None of us are separate from each other. I like to think of all of us being connected to a giant nervous system. We're all connected. We all have these different earth suits that we've been given that make us look differently, and our personalities are different, but at the baseline, we're all the same. So being connected is another hugely important step, and it's something that I help people with a lot, because that for me, it created the biggest impact. So you have to stop what you're doing. You have to take an inventory of what's happening in my body, where am I feeling it, become aware of your breath, connect. I always use the heart space to connect. And then whatever incident is taking place, to let go and forgive. And there's so much, I mean, this is like very surfacey what I'm sharing with you guys. There's so much to all of this, because letting go and forgiving sounds so easy, but it's not. Even if it's your spouse that didn't take out the garbage after you asked him 3 times and he still hasn't done it, now you're irritated. And that irritation creates stress inside of you, which then gets reflected out to your kids, gets reflected out to the people at the coffee shop. As much as we think it's not a big deal, we keep pushing these emotions down, trying to say it's not a big deal. And all that's doing is creating kind of, I like to say, nuclear waste inside of us. It's radioactive emotion that's still alive because we haven't processed it. We've just said it's not a big deal, shove it down. So it's literally alive inside of us. And we try to hold it together, but then it starts popping out in destructive ways. So we might snap at our kids, we might be mean to somebody, we might have road rage. That's road rage. When everyone's like, why do I have road rage? That's why you have road rage. When you have the disturbance inside of you of all these emotions that we're suppressing, it's anxiety. That's anxiety. It's because we're not allowing whatever is there to fully process and emote. When we think of doing that right now, we're probably like, if we did that, it would be like an insane asylum. If everybody were just expressing whatever they needed to in any moment, it would be a crazy, insane asylum. Yes, it probably would be initially, because there's so much shit inside that we all have to clear. But eventually, what happens is your reaction to someone cutting you off on the freeway, because there's nothing inside of you to explode out, and that's cleared away and there's no disturbance. When someone cuts you off, it doesn't affect you. Instead of flipping them off and saying, you're an asshole, you'll bow and say, I'm sorry you're having such a bad day. Like, that's the reality. Does that make sense to you? Was that clear? I hope it was, because it's, so letting go and forgiving sounds easy, right? Like our husband, I can let go and forgive that he did that the 400th time, right? So when we do these steps, we then elevate in consciousness. And that's our end goal, is to keep trying to elevate in consciousness. We want to elevate. When we're in a higher state of consciousness, you're automatically calm, you're automatically connected, you're automatically creative, you're way more intelligent. You come up with the best ideas that just drop in out of nowhere and you wonder where they came from. It's because you're in a higher state of consciousness. That's when supreme divine intelligence can come through with a lot of creativity. So I'm sharing a lot with you guys right now. I'm like, so back to the basic of catching yourself. Am I in a stressful state? And I could ask you guys what a stressful state is right now, but we don't have that much more time. So it's anything negative, and what we call negative. I don't even call these things negative anymore. They just are what they are. But anger, fear, resentment, guilt, shame, worry, sadness, pain, hurt. I'm sure you guys could name about 100 more. If we had a class, you know, if we were doing a workshop, we'd name a bunch more. But whenever you can, the hardest part for us is stopping and admitting that we're in that place. None of us want to admit it. We all want to pretend like it's okay. Everything's okay. We live in a culture that thrives on happy, 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 everything's good. It's not. It's not good. And that's why we have so much anxiety, so much depression. Anyway, so Virginia, I guess for you, the meditation will definitely help you. And meditation is basically to help cultivate awareness. And when we are aware of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, everything kind of becomes okay. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Mine is a long history.
Long history?
When I was little, and I don't know exactly when it started, but by the time I was turning 15, my dad tried to really molest me.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be, he'd give me big hugs and kisses and stuff growing up, and it got to a point where I would hide in my room, shut off my light and my door and all that kind of stuff just to stay away from him so he wouldn't come in. But I never told my mom about it. And so I dealt with that. Then shortly after that, I was 17, I believe, 16, 17. And I was date raped.
Oh.
At 18, I was raped by somebody else.
Mm.
And then after doing counseling, I married after I got out of high school to the guy actually that had date raped me, because then we had dated, you know, for a while. Later, I went through counseling and discovered through my counseling that I was raped through my marriage also, when I was pregnant. And by my husband. Repeat history, you know, and I kept trying to suppress it. I had an affair, more than one, due to it. Before we got married and after we got married. It wasn't until after we had kids that I started having an affair. We divorced. I married an alcoholic. It was a challenge. Had an affair there a couple times. Left that. Married my husband now, and we've been married 31 years.
Wow.
Never shared any of it with him. I never told nobody knew. It was just me. And then I had we had our first daughter, and she started getting a little bit older, or she was still little. And my oldest son from my first marriage was always huggy kissy with her. And he was getting into trouble. And through that, we had visited with a counselor. And that's when I finally realized where all my feelings were coming from on that. Because she finally said, you need to say it out loud. And I finally did. And so that was the start of some counseling. um, through my second ordeal of counseling, things had restarted surfacing, and this is when my girls were still little. I later found out that my boys, when they were little, were sexually molested by my babysitter's brother.
Oh my God.
And they were 18 and 20 when I found out. And they were like 4 and 6 when it was happening. So of course, going through counseling of all of that sorts, there was a few of us, my church, that went to a group counseling together at a Christian counselor. And it helped until about 2 years ago. My daughter she just turned 29 today. Her husband, soon to be ex, we found out sexually assaulted his son. Sexually abused, let's put it that way. And this was 2 years ago. He was in the Army. He had been deployed to go to Bosnia. While he was over there, my grandson, for a school out, shared with his counselor what had happened, and it had been like 6 months prior to that, or at least longer, because he'd already been gone months. So we don't know an exact date. And then, of course, all of that resurfaced. So I went back through some counseling, and then here this last fall, and it was on a call. I started visiting with Lindsay, and some of it had resurfaced, and it was around the time that my mom had passed away. I lost her in 1984 at 71. 6 months prior, she shared with me that she was always afraid that my dad would try to molest one of us girls because his dad did his daughters. And I couldn't say anything. I fought it back so that she didn't see what was going on inside me. Let it go. And for some reason, this last year, it really hit me hard. And then Jenny and I talked about it, and then right at about that same time frame in between the two conversations, I went into an anxiety attack. I was bawling. I had said something on Facebook. Lindsay got a hold of me right away. She called me. She walked me through an exercise, let me settle down. All I could do for a few days again was go through crying. I'm gonna cry again.
It's okay.
And that's when she shared with me then was that I had PTSD, and I never even knew. And we talked about it, but so every once in a while it still resurfaces, and I try to deal with it. I talk with my former pastor quite a bit, because he's helped me through a lot. And I just finally shared with my husband a year ago what happened with my dad, because I'd never told anybody what exactly took place. And
How was his?
he said if he would have known, our kids would not have been around my dad at all. And I mean, he was supportive about it. He just had wished I had said something sooner. And I said, well, I know, but I said I could.
It's okay.
For a lot of reasons, and that's pretty much the last that I've really really talk to it to a lot of people, to very many people about it. I do share occasionally things that can take place. First time I ever spoke about it was about 5 years ago at a deal up at the college here with the college students, because we were doing a sexual assault, talking with an officer what to do to try and prevent things and all that kind of stuff. And I had already talked with him prior to. And I don't know, God told me to share, and I shared, just recapped on it, but I shared, and all their mouths about dropped to the floor. And, you know, I guess I took it as it was part of my healing each time that I was able to break out. And then it got clouded over for a while again, and I shared also with some of my church family about that, and then also about the affairs that I had, because we were talking about it in Sunday school, and I burst into tears, and I finally had to say something. And so, yeah, when I knew that you were going to be on, I was like, oh, great. This is going to be good, because I knew I needed this.
Joyce, I really appreciate you sharing, because the sharing is so important, not only for you, but for other people to hear. So I really appreciate that your willingness to do that. And it's hard because when you've been traumatized, you don't feel safe. And
It took me a long time.
I commend you for doing that, and I thank you.
My second husband was more, even though he was an alcoholic, he was more emotional abuse, especially to my oldest son. And we fought a lot. And I really had to get out of the situation. And then I had nightmares that he was going to come at me and try and talk me to coming back. I had it for almost 2 years after my husband and I got married.
Wow.
So
How are your kids doing, Joyce?
my oldest struggled for a lot of years on and off. He had 2 failed marriages, kids from his first one, and he's with a young lady now that they've been together. They've been married 3 years, but they've been together 6. Very nice, loving. She shows him all compassion, all loving. She brings out the best in him. He shut his kids off for a while. He shut me off for a while when his second marriage fell. And there was 8 years that we didn't communicate. And then just before he was getting married, we finally started talking again. My second son, he kept it inside and never really dealt with it. He said it happened. There's not much he can do about it. And then he went into the guards. And so he's got more of a, after being in the guards, he just retired 20 years. And he's this is the way that it's got to be. Kind of, he's very strong, very stern, sometimes rigid. We've got good communication. So, but yeah, both of them turned out really different. But they are different emotionally because of what I went through. And I see it more and more now than I used to as I've grown up. My oldest is going to be 43 and my second is going to be 40. So, yeah, they've been through a lot.
Thank you for sharing all that, Joyce. Sorry for all the trauma. It's a lot. And I was just interviewed for a documentary on trauma and PTSD, and one of the questions was, does it get passed on through generations? And I share a story very similar to yours about a grandmother that gets raped, then her daughter gets raped, then her daughter gets raped, and it just gets passed on and on. And
But
that's
so hard. The girls told them, I would almost preach to them, don't go hang out with people you don't know. You don't. My youngest used to, when she was a kid, she'd go up and say hi to anybody and everybody and scare the daylights out of me. One day I saw her, she was in grade school. She was sitting on some guy's lap, talking to him face to face, and her legs were straddling on his, and it just freaked me. I about had a coronary right there. I went and got her teacher and said, no, I can't have this happen. You know, she was the one I was concerned about more than my oldest one. But I think I was really protective because of it. And I finally shared with them both why. And I said, you guys have got to understand why. But they were adults by the time I said anything. I found it very hard to say anything when they were younger because they wouldn't understand. And so I waited until they were adults and shared with them. And sometimes I was concerned about my youngest daughter's kids. And especially now that the oldest one has been sexually abused, it scares me. One of my oldest grandson, he was kind of molested by a cousin, and he tried to molest his sister. And he ended up in jail for a while, and he was like 14 at the time. And they went through a big to-do about it. And so it scares me. It really does. That it's going to go on.
Yeah. And that's the frightening thing, is if people don't get what they need in order to really process it and heal it, then it does continue on. And so for me, it's always been inspiration for me to, I don't have children, but I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I think of them all the time when the going gets tough for me. And I say to myself, Catherine, if you don't do this, when you pass on, it's going to get passed on to them. So do your work. Like, it's really what's inspired me a lot to do this hard inner work, but it's what we need to do in order to heal and make it easier for those that come after us. Thank you for sharing that, Joyce. I really
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. And maybe we can hop on a call and talk about it more. I just don't want to, we're almost to a close, and I wanted to just do a little meditation with you guys, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
It's just a 3-minute practice, but it's a really powerful practice. And I'll ask Jenny if she can send you there's a recording audio version as well as a printout, so you can read it and do it. But it's called Serene Mind, and it's a very potent practice that you can do anytime that you find that you catch yourself in that stressful state, to stop and do Serene Mind. And sometimes I'll do Serene Mind and my mind is still agitated, so I'll stop and do it again. I've done it 2 or 3 times until my mind gets a little more stable and clear, and it's not, when you're in kind of fight, flight, freeze, when the mind won't stop, it's just spinning out on itself, telling the story over and over and over again. You got to stop when that's happening. So Virginia, I don't know if you can find a little quiet spot for 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm showing is it only 3 minutes? Okay. Okay, I'll go upstairs for a minute.
Yeah, it's and we tend to believe that we can't control the mind, but you actually can't control the mind. There's a much greater intelligence than just this mind. This mind is very, very limiting. And when we meditate, we connect to that greater, higher intelligence that can literally see the mind and witness the mind. It helps you to start believing that you're not just these thoughts. You're much more than just the thoughts. So serene mind helps you get into that more expanded place so you can see from a clear perspective what's actually going on and then move from that place. All right? So I'm just going to have you close your eyes. And I just want you to notice what your breath is doing right now. I don't want you to change the breath. I just want you to notice, is your breath moving in or out? And we're going to take 3 deep breaths now, in and out through the nose. And you're going to take the breath all the way into your belly. So it's really deep. Exhale out all the air. And then slowly inhale through the nose, feeling your chest rise, feeling your belly rise as you take in as much breath as you can. And then slowly start to exhale, feeling your belly soften and your chest soften. And again, deep breath in. And release. And one more time, big breath in. And release. And now notice if there's any emotion arising. And I want you to internally name the emotion that you're feeling right now. Is it sadness? Is it fear, anxiety, worry? Is it joy, contentment, peace, calm? Make it a practice to be aware of what you're actually experiencing. What are you feeling? And now after you've named that feeling, I want you to notice the direction of your thinking. Does your thinking now have you in the past, or does it have you in the future? I don't want you to judge it. I don't want you to try to change it. I just want you to notice the direction of your thinking. Am I in the past or the future? And now I want you to bring all of your awareness, your focus, right between your eyebrows. And now that awareness from right between the eyebrows, I want you to slowly shift that awareness right into the center of your brain. And in the center of your brain is like a golden flame of light, flickering, hovering, floating right in the center of your brain. It's a very powerful spot in your brain, right in the center. Just visualize that golden flame. And take a deep breath in. Exhale through the mouth. And then gently open your eyes. It was so nice to meet you. I'll have Jenny send you that meditation. It'll be a recorded version and also a printout. Do it as many times as you can whenever you find yourself in a stressful place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope we see each other again.
Yes,
Blessings.
and is there information about how to find more about on your stuff? What book titles and stuff like that in your classes?
You know what? I'm gonna put on here and the title of my book. Thanks for asking. Where's my website? And if either of you want a free copy of my book, I'll send you an ebook version.
Oh, great. Thank you.
That'd be great.
If you want to drop your emails in there where I can email them. That's the title.
Thank you. Yeah, I know a lot of people that would benefit from this information. I'd love to share with them.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, it's a hot topic right now and it doesn't make me happy, but at least I know ways to get through it. So I'll send you guys the book later on today and let's stay in touch.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
You're welcome. Thanks for sharing, both of you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Joyce.
Bye, Virginia.
Bye, Catherine.
Bye.